Well, I finally took my very first cruise with Virgin Voyages. I'd been wanting to do this for many years, and a lot of my followers had been asking me to do it, and I finally got on board and found out things are very different on board Virgin Voyages. And I'm going to tell you exactly what I mean. I'm also going to answer the question of, is it too raunchy? Is it too wild? Because that was a lot of what I heard before I went on the cruise from folks. So I'm going to tell you all that and more in my official review of my cruise on board the Valiant Lady. Hello everyone, my name is Zach. I am the Traveling Man, and if you've never watched one of my cruise review videos before, I basically go through everything, and everything as I experienced it. So this is where I'm going to be very honest. I'm just going to tell you how things were. A couple years ago, I created a model to do these ship reviews. Since I do so many of them, I wanted to make them as fair as I could across the board, and so I used my own STEPS review process, and STEPS is an acronym, and there are 5 elements to STEPS. The first being S for ship. We'll talk all about the Valiant Lady. We'll talk about some of the infrastructure like the Wi-Fi, the room, things like that. Then we'll talk about the T. The T stands for taste. And of course, we're going to talk about food. And there's a lot to be discussed about food on Valiant Lady and Virgin Voyages because food is quite a bit different than what you would see on other cruise lines. The E is for entertainment. And entertainment was very different, and you're definitely going to want to hear how wild some of the entertainment was on board the ship. The P is for ports. I'll tell you about where we stopped and sort of how each of the stops on board the cruise were. And then the S stands, the second S rather, stands for service, and we'll talk about how the crew was, how the service experience overall across the ship was. So I'm just going to jump right in with the S for ship. And I'm just going to say that the ship was amazing. That was my initial thought when I boarded the ship. And I didn't have very high hopes because I had seen the pictures and videos. As I know a lot of you have, they might have never been on Virgin Voyages before, you might be thinking it looks different. Sort of grayer, it's all the red. I didn't think it was very pretty the first time I saw pictures and videos. I was not impressed. But y'all, when you're actually on the ship itself, it's a completely different environment. There's just a different vibe on the ship. I really love the ship. And the cool thing about that is because the first 3 Virgin Voyages ships, the Scarlet Lady, the Valiant Lady, and the Resilient Lady, they're all identical. And then the Brilliant Lady, which is going to TBD come out at some point, it's also going to be exactly like those. So you know exactly what you're going to get across the entire fleet because they only have 3 and soon 4 ships. They all are basically identical to each other. So I really enjoyed the ship. And as I walked around the ship and explored, of course, Virgin is no kids, right? So I felt like the entire ship was an adult playground. That's just what kept coming up in my mind because you would walk out on the pool deck and you're at the pool. There's like all these bars around the pool, and then suddenly it's like, oh, there's like outdoor gym equipment, and then oh, there's the gym like around the pool. You would go up on one of the top decks, one of the upper decks of the ship, and they actually did have an adult playground. They had like a boxing ring with like a punching bag in there. They had seesaws for adults. They had swings for adults. And y'all, I was on those swings all the time. It was so much fun. Basketball courts and jogging tracks. Do whatever you want to because you're on vacation. That's sort of the vibe. I also really enjoyed my room, my stateroom. Now, the staterooms on board Virgin ships, they're quite different. They have a different aesthetic, but I enjoyed that because I found they're not quite as stuffy as some of the other cruise ship rooms can be. You know, you get a cruise ship from like the 2000s, and those rooms are quite stuffy. They have a certain decor. You're seeing it in your brain now. It's not quite like that on Virgin. Their rooms are just different, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed a different aesthetic, a different feel to the room. It was also cool how the bed in the room was actually able to be transformed into like a sofa if you were going to have guests over. So during the day it could be a sofa, and at night it could be the bed. I also enjoyed that the beds were low to the ground. It was easy to get up and into bed. I don't know, just something about that room made me feel like a teenager again. The balcony, or the sea terrace as they call it, was really cool. I really enjoyed the hammock. The hammock was my favorite part probably of the whole cruise. And I really don't know why other cruise lines have missed the boat on having hammocks on their balconies, because there's just something about stretching out in that hammock and watching the sea go by. It just really made my experience amazing. So really enjoyed having that hammock, really enjoyed that room. I also really enjoyed the little bands that they give you. You know, you wear like the bracelet. That's really cool because that acts as your SeaPass card the entire time. So you don't have to have a card that you have to keep up with, or a card that you might accidentally leave on the counter or something when you walk out of the room and then realize I've locked myself out. Once it's on your wrist for the day, it's pretty much there. So that was nice. You can get in and out of your room with it. They tap it for any purchases or any food or drinks that you get around the ship. So I thought that was really cool technology. Also under the ship, I'm going to talk about the embarkation process, just to warn you a little bit. If you've never been with them before, maybe you have one booked or going soon. They do start embarkation quite late for Virgin Voyages. So if you look at your boarding documents and you're like, oh, boarding, it says my boarding time's not till 4 o'clock. There's no way that's true. It's true. They actually don't start embarkation until about 1:30. I think right at 1:30 they started embarkation. Now, I had the Deep Blue Extras. And the Deep Blue Extras are basically, they loyalty status matched me from some other cruise lines that I've sailed with and have status with. They matched my status and gave me the Deep Blue Extras. And the Deep Blue Extras included an entire host of things. Things like free unlimited Wi-Fi, and this was like the streaming Wi-Fi for the whole cruise. It was like priority embarkation and boarding. It also included like a daily, I think a $10 coffee credit for anywhere around the ship. I think it was something like $100 of like bar tab on the ship. All kinds of perks. And I know that they've recently changed that program, so I don't think they're loyalty status matching anymore. But you might want to check and see if you might be able to get those Deep Blue Extras for one reason or another. So you'll have to check up on that, because I'm not quite sure what they're doing now. I know the program has changed though. I mentioned the Deep Blue Extras here because number one, it was incredible. I couldn't believe how much they gave me being a first time cruiser with them. But second, because I had the Deep Blue Extras, I was able to have priority embarkation, and like I mentioned, I was one of the first people on the ship. It was very quick and easy, the process. Once they opened the doors to let us in, went right upstairs, got my little wristband, went through security, went up and sat for maybe 10 minutes to wait for them to actually start boarding. They boarded the rock stars, which is the like folks staying in the suites, and then they called for general boarding, and I was the first person of that group to board the ship. So very quick and efficient process, but it does start later. I had to wait like a couple hours because I'm like, oh no way, they're not starting boarding until like 2 o'clock. They're leaving at 5 or 6, you know. But yeah, they absolutely do wait until quite late in the afternoon before they start boarding the ship. Now, I talked about having free streaming Wi-Fi, and I will say that the internet was great. It was very reliable the entire cruise. It was an 8-day cruise down into the Caribbean, so we were in the Caribbean the entire time. Had no issues with connectivity. Was always able to do pretty much whatever I wanted to. You could watch videos on your phone with pretty good latency on those. I will say, though, that any VoIP or voice over IP, that was quite difficult to do. So if you were wanting to use Wi-Fi calling, you could call someone and you could hear them. They just couldn't hear you. So it's almost like the upload. They really throttle those upload speeds. So maybe they'll like upload your voice out to send it out. Just wasn't working. FaceTime was incredibly reliable. So they were allowing like FaceTime. That'll work great. You can do voice over FaceTime. But if you're doing Wi-Fi calling and some other apps that do like voiceover stuff, you're probably not going to be able to do those. So just know that is like the only limitation of the unlimited like streaming package of internet on Virgin. And similar to the internet, I'll talk about the Virgin app. They have a lot on there. They really do. You can make your dining reservations. You can book excursions on there. You can see and make reservations for shows where you might need to. But it just wasn't great. It was very clunky. It was unreliable. It would crash a lot. Virgin needs to do quite a bit of work on their app. An app is an integral part of the cruising experience on Virgin because you do need to make reservations for a lot of things. You do need to make dining reservations for all of the dining rooms, and you need to do that if you want to dine in a particular dining room at a particular time. You want to do that 45 days before your cruise. You're going to need the app to do that. Once you're on board, you're going to need to make reservations for certain shows. So they need a little bit more reliable of an app in order to make that experience a little bit more seamless. Now, going from something I didn't quite care that much for to something I loved tremendously is there are no dress codes and no elegant evenings on board Virgin. So you can pretty much go in shorts or simple t-shirts or whatever. I wore shorts a lot to dinner. And then no elegant evening. Just every night, it's go to a restaurant. And that's because the dining is a little bit different on Virgin. We're talking about things. You keep hearing me say that things are different. That's sort of the theme of Virgin. They're trying to do things different. They're trying to, you have all your other cruise lines over here. They're kind of in the same box. Virgin's trying to be over here in a box by themselves, doing things different to attract people to a different type of cruising. And they did that through their dress codes and no elegant evening. And I'll talk a little bit more about food in a minute and tell you how dining is completely different on Virgin. Another thing I really loved about the ship is there are no announcements. You are not getting pestered every 5 minutes with, hello, this is your cruise director, and here are the activities coming up in the next 10 minutes on the ship. None of that. They would not make announcements like that telling you what the events were. The events were on the app. The events were printed on a daily happenings flyer you could get around the ship. They were put in your room sometimes. No need for a cruise director. In fact, I never even saw a cruise director or knew that there was a cruise director. There was the happenings cast, but I don't know that there was actually a cruise director, and I really enjoyed that. Sometimes the announcements are way too much on cruises. Can we all be honest about that? Like, the announcements get to be a little bit too much. You have to hear from the cruise director 3 times a day, really? So with all those things considered, Virgin Voyages has gotten it figured out when it comes to like developing a great cruise ship. A cruise ship just for adults, an adult playground, hammocks on the balcony. That's why the Valiant Lady is getting a 4.9 out of a 5 rating. So next up is the T for taste. We're gonna talk about the food. And I started out quite skeptical, y'all, because I had heard great things. Everyone was telling me, you know, Virgin has really good food. You're really gonna like the food on Virgin. You've got to try Virgin just for the food. And I started out the first night at the test kitchen. There are, I think, 6 restaurants on board the ship, and they're all different themed. Like, test kitchen is just sort of like an open kitchen concept. You see food being prepared around you. They bring it to your table, and it's a lot of like weird like pairings of stuff you might never have had together before. They try to make it very unique in there. So there's that. There's also a Mexican restaurant, Pink Agave. There's Razzle Dazzle, which is a little bit healthier options. They are open for brunch also. There's the Wake, which is like your traditional steakhouse. There's Gunbae, which is the Korean barbecue restaurant on board. So everything's a little bit different. But all of these restaurants and all of the food on board the ship and all of Virgin Voyages ships is included in your cruise fare. There is no specialty dining. There are no restaurants that you have to look at and just drool outside the window because it costs $70 to get in plus service charge. Everything's included. So all of the restaurants, they are the main dining room. There is no main dining room. It's those 6 restaurants, and each night you can make reservations to go to them, and you can go to them as many times as you'd like throughout the cruise. However, I think you are limited to 2 reservations per each restaurant on the app. So you will have to go to walk up and make reservations once you're on board the ship. And you actually can. Some people were messaging me and being like, well, you can't get reservations for dining on Virgin. But if you can't get it on the app, you can walk up in person to the restaurants, and they do hold back some reservations for walk-ups. So the first night I started out skeptical because I didn't go to Test Kitchen. I was really excited about Test Kitchen. It sounded like a cool concept. However, it just wasn't that great. And it's sort of a preset menu. And they just have listed on the menu like, this is the blue cheese course, or this is the mushroom course. And you don't really know what that means. They explain it when you go in there. But one of the things that they brought to the table was literally some green peas with an egg yolk in the middle. And they're like, mix that egg yolk up in those peas and then dip your bread in it. And I'm like, I don't know about this. This is not a great start to the food being incredible on Virgin. However, I was proven wrong because as I went to the other restaurants, I learned not only is dining different on Virgin, but it's also better on Virgin because you do get the freedom of all the various restaurants you can go to, but the food's also pretty good, y'all. I learned as I went from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant around the ship. Another restaurant that I ate at and was excited to eat at was Razzle Dazzle, and the first night that I ate there, I actually ate dinner there 2 nights of the cruise, but the first night that I ate dinner there, it just wasn't great. So there were a couple of dining experiences where I was just like, this is not great. This is not the best food at sea, you know, better food than the other cruise lines like some people had led me to believe. However, that was pretty much the end of like the bad dining. So 2 nights were not that great, but then the rest was incredible. And speaking of Razzle Dazzle, they're actually open for a breakfast / brunch. They're open very early in the morning until like well into the afternoon. So that was awesome too, because that was different from what other cruise lines do, because typically if there's a main dining room option on a cruise ship, it might open at like 7 a.m. and be done by 9 or 10 o'clock, and you've got to really rush to get up, get ready, get breakfast. And the Razzle Dazzle was incredible for breakfast. I went in there just about every day after the first time I went in there because they had this avocado toast. That was incredible. I mean, it was just something out of a dream. And I couldn't believe that it was included. And that experience, not being able to believe that it was included, was a common experience on board the ship. Because I would just go to a restaurant and have food, and I'd be like, that tastes like it should cost me like $20. You know, that should be specialty dining. That would be specialty dining on other cruise lines. You know, you sort of get that feeling sometimes that the food is so bland and just so ordinary and basic on some cruise lines because they want you to pay extra to have, you know, an entree brought to you from the steakhouse, or extra just to go to the steakhouse and eat so you don't have to eat in the main dining room. But on Virgin, most of the things were incredible. Now, similar to Razzle Dazzle being open each day for breakfast and brunch, the Wake was as well. And the Wake was also a really good option for breakfast and brunch, but they had heavier options in there. I felt like if you want to eat maybe lighter or healthier for breakfast, you want to go to Razzle Dazzle. And then if you want like a full carb breakfast, just full of carbohydrates, then you want to go to the Wake. Because they had offerings in there like French toast and eggs Benedict and like your typical breakfasty type foods, and also some brunch offerings as well, like shrimp and things like that. So both were incredible, and I was really pleased at the sit-down breakfast and brunch options available on board the ship. Now, I'm just touching briefly on the food options here, but I will say, now that I mentioned some of my worst dining experiences, I will talk about the best dining experiences, the best restaurants, those evening main dining type restaurants on board the ship. And those are Gunbae and Pink Agave. And I'll start with Pink Agave. Pink Agave is the Mexican inspired, or the Mexican restaurant on board the ship. And the food in Pink Agave was just amazing. And it was also probably some of the quickest service I had at any of the restaurants that I went to on board Valiant Lady. I really enjoyed the food that I had in there. It was all very delicious. For my main course in there, I actually had a ribeye steak with cheese. And that's all it was. There were no sides or anything. It was a ribeye steak covered with cheese. Delicious. And again, a dish where you would be like, that's not specialty dining. Like, literally, that would cost me $30 or $40 on another cruise line. Things are different on Virgin Voyages. Gunbae was another one where you would have sworn it would have been an additional cost to eat there. And it was kind of a cool concept because it is Korean barbecue, but you were sat with other groups of people. I think the table in all had 6 or 8 people. So you might be sat with another group of people to make sure that there are 6 or 8 people. And that's, of course, because your server does come to the table and prepare a lot of the meat right there in front of you. But all the food in there was delicious. There were table games that the server would come over and play with the entire table. So even if you didn't know the people that they sat you by the end of the dinner, you played so many games and interacted with them so much that they felt like new friends. So I really liked that concept. And the food in there was tremendous. So Pink Agave and Gunbae were my favorite restaurants on board the Valiant Lady. Now, speaking of things being different, Virgin Voyages likes to pride themselves on the fact that they don't have a buffet. Instead, they have this concept called the galley. And the galley is essentially like a food hall. So you walk in, and there's all these different stands. There's like a bento box stand where it's just bento boxes all day long. You can even go in there at breakfast time, and they have like fruit bento boxes. In the afternoon, it's sushi. You can grab those and go anywhere. Then they have the diner. The diner is actually open, or a section of the diner is open 24 hours a day. You can go in there and it's just like a diner. You can sit down at the stool and order eggs or omelets or whatever from the menu. They also have a burger bar. They have a full dessert section over there. And the cool thing about all these various sections is you're not really serving yourself. There are people there serving it to you. Or if you are serving yourself, it's sort of like a covered food dish that you're grabbing and taking away. It's not like you're getting like utensils yourself and getting the food out like you would on any other cruise line. Now, one thing I will say to Virgin Voyages about the galley concept, they like to say, we don't have a buffet, but y'all, it's pretty much a buffet. It's not the traditional buffet, let's say that. It's not just like tons of food that you get yourself. It's not the traditional. There are plenty of different options. Another thing I really enjoyed on the ship were the little dessert snack selections at the social club. The social club is a place where you can go to play games. They got tons of board games. They have like pool tables, foosball tables. They also have food options in there. You can get popcorn in there just about all day. You can get hot dogs, you can get hot wings, but then they have like this little dessert case. And I tried a couple things. I think I tried a cake pop one day, and then I tried the cereal bars that they had in there. And y'all, these were like Fruity Pebble Rice Krispie treats. And I don't know how many of those I ate throughout the cruise, but they were one of my most favorite things that I had the entire cruise. So make sure you go to Club Social and check out those desserts, because again, all included, you don't have to pay any extra. Same thing with the ice cream shop on board, or the ice cream stand. Lick Me Till I Scream. You can go there at any time of day and get an ice cream. That's included. They also have pizza. I didn't get to try the pizza, but I do know that the pizza, again, is sort of made to order. It can take a little bit of time, and sometimes the lines were long. And then finally, there is the Grounds Coffee. That is the coffee shop, and right there they have all sorts of like croissants and muffins and things you can take away. And then, of course, they have coffee that's prepared to order. That was a really cool location, right central in the ship. And then they also had a smaller Grounds Coffee location up in the galley, so you could get coffee up there also. One more cool thing about food is soda. Soda is included on Virgin Voyages. They do have soda machines inside of the galley, so you can get soda and you're not going to be charged any additional. So, for all the reasons stated, I'm going to give food on Valiant Lady a 4.4 out of a 5 rating. Now, next up is E for entertainment. And entertainment was different on board Valiant Lady in the best ways. Like, this is the place where you could see along with the food. But you could see that they were purposefully trying to be different than all the other cruise lines. I already said there was no cruise director. I really enjoyed that, but I really just enjoyed the different selections of entertainment all across the ship. And there was tons of entertainment. I feel like there was a themed party just about every night if you were into that. And that's one thing I want to say. I'll go ahead and talk about this, about the ship being too wild or the ship being too raunchy, and you might not be into that. That's fine. Still go, because you don't have to participate in the shows. You don't have to go to the shows if you might not like what the show is, or if you feel like the party's too raunchy or whatever, you don't have to go. The vibe on board the ship is that it's always poised for a party. Like, there's people on there that are just ready to like have a party at any moment. But you can go back to your room and lay on the hammock, which is what I did 90% of the cruise. I would maybe go to a show or two in the evening. Otherwise, I was in my room relaxing on my hammock. So that's the beauty of Virgin Voyages. It's really the beauty of any cruise. You can make it your own. You can do as much as you want to or as little as you want to. So it doesn't have to be wild for you. You don't have to go to the parties or the theme nights or whatever if you still want to go and enjoy the great food and the good entertainment and not really be about a theme party. But if you do want a theme party or you do want a nightclub, they do have all of that. They also had a comedian on board the ship. He was there every night, and he pretty much had the same show. It was repeating every night. And a lot of the shows on Virgin actually are that way. You see a lot of repeating shows throughout the cruise because the venues where they actually have the entertainment are quite small. And in fact, the Red Room, which is like the main theater, we'll say, it's supposed to be the nearest thing to a main theater on board the ship, it seats very few people. And you do have to have tickets, which you do reserve on that clunky app, because they do limit the number. So I was able to go to a number of shows throughout the cruise. The first night of the cruise, they had Around the World in 80 Minutes with the Diva. The Diva is the resident drag queen on board the ship, and that was a really good show. One of the other shows that I was able to see was the Misbehave show, and that was inside the Red Room. They actually had this a couple times, and I caught both shows just to see if it was maybe a little bit different. But again, that's how I found out the shows are actually the same. They just repeat them throughout the cruise. But the Misbehave show was really cool. It was an audience participation show. Like, it just depends on what audience is in there and how much they feel like participating and how great the show is going to be. But it was a fun show. If you've ever sailed on Carnival and gone to their Quest, which they have some nights, I know they brought that back recently, it's very similar to that. They also had the Ship Show one night. The Ship Show was like their own variety show that they have inside the Manor. The Manor is the nightclub on board the ship. But the Ship Show was actually a dinner show. So you could go in there, again, included. You could go in there, they had dinner, and they only had a couple of offerings for dinner. So it's not like you get a whole menu to pick from. They only had like, you get this or this. I didn't eat there, I didn't dine there. I did go to the show and saw most of the show, and it was a good show. It was very entertaining. But I did hear from some people around the ship that the food wasn't that great in there. And the night that I went there, I had dinner reservation for somewhere else. So I didn't actually get to partake in the food myself. So I can't tell you how good or not good the food was. But an awesome concept to have a dinner show on board a cruise ship. I've never really seen that before. Again, it's different. And then finally, I was able to go to Dual Reality. This was another like production show that they had inside the Red Room. It was really cool, and another one that really brought the audience in together, and really just very interactive. So I was really pleased with those like core production shows, those main shows that they'd have throughout the cruise. Now there was also karaoke. One night they had karaoke, well, a couple of nights I think, with the Diva. They also had so many live bands all throughout the ship, like all the time. There was just live music all around the ship. So a very lively atmosphere on board the ships, especially in the evening. Of course, I mentioned they did have theme nights and parties. They had a pajama party, a holiday pajama party one night because I sailed during the holiday season. They also had parties in the nightclub all throughout the cruise. And then, of course, they had Scarlet Night. And Scarlet Night is like the big night on the entire ship. Like, that's the one people plan for. They plan their outfits. They plan where they're going to be and where they're going to dine around Scarlet Night. And Scarlet Night is a whole event the night that they have it. It starts at like 5 o'clock. And on the main promenade deck of the ship, you know, where all the shops and everything are, they dim the lights. It's a red hue all around that deck. There's special activities. They have tales of Scarlet Night and tell you what, you know, how that originated. So a really cool night that culminates in a major deck party, the biggest deck party of the entire cruise, the Scarlet Night deck party. And that was a wild party. I was able to walk out and catch just a few minutes of that. But people were really enjoying it. People were really having a good time. And I know a lot of cruise lines like to do deck parties. They like to make that a big thing. But I don't think anyone does it quite like Virgin is doing it. So Scarlet Night is not to be missed if you're someone who likes those deck parties, because it's one like you've not been to before, I promise you that. So there's nothing I can give entertainment but a solid, a perfect 5 out of a 5 rating for Valiant Lady because it was so different and some of the best entertainment I've ever seen on board a cruise ship. And it really won me over. It's one of the reasons that I enjoyed the cruise so much because it was so different. It wasn't the same stage production shows that you're used to seeing on a cruise. I enjoyed that. Next up is P for ports. And like I said, this was an 8-night cruise down to the Eastern Caribbean. Our first stop was Puerto Plata in the Dominican Republic. That was a cool place. I'd never been there before. I'd been to Amber Cove, which is nearby, which is Carnival Cruise Line's private experience. But Puerto Plata was a great place and really enjoyed it there. The next stop was San Juan, Puerto Rico, which is always a fantastic stop. Then we stopped in St. Croix. Never been to St. Croix before, but wasn't really that impressed with St. Croix, unfortunately. And then we ended our cruise in Bimini. And of course, I think all Virgin Voyages that sail in the Caribbean visit Bimini because they have the Virgin Voyages Beach Club there. And I will say that the Beach Club is probably the best cruise line experience, like ashore, that you're going to get anywhere. So, you know, think of all the private islands that all the different cruise lines have. I think that the Beach Club in Bimini is just a step above all that. I just loved it. The food that they had there, which is included, was just so delicious. The vibe was cool. The pools are huge. They had 2 huge pools. And then the beach, it's Bimini. And you just about can't beat Bimini anywhere because Bimini is such a beautiful place. So, for all those reasons, I'm going to give ports on this cruise a 4.5 out of a 5 rating. And lastly, we're going to talk about the second S, which is for service. And it was not a great start to service around the ship. The first couple of days, I was questioning, are they understaffed? Because I would be waiting for food somewhere. The very first day of the cruise, I was waiting for food for 20-25 minutes. No one ever even came over and acknowledged that I was there. There was also an incident that I witnessed where a crew member was very verbal about being done. They were overworked on their shift. They didn't have any help. And they just sort of threw up their hands and said, I'm done, very loudly. And we're calling to other crew members and telling them, I'm done. You need to come help me because I'm not had a break all day. So not really seen that on a cruise before. And I do have to deduct points from that the first couple of days. And I felt like because this was a very full sailing, I mean, there was no extra rooms left on this ship. We were 100% full. I'm not sure if the crew was used to maybe having that many people. It did take a couple days to adjust. And by the 3rd day of the cruise, the service actually suddenly, flipping a light switch, became pretty awesome. And I was actually surprised at just how quickly it became that much better. So for most of the 8 days of the cruise, the service was incredible. Anytime you went to any of the restaurants, it was great service. Everyone was very nice. So the service turned around tremendously, and I was happy about that because I didn't want it to be a very bad review for service that I was really going to have to knock them for. So they really turned it around. My room steward was incredible. I mean, he was very quick to clean my room. They actually have buttons inside the room when you need your room cleaned. And anytime I hit that, he was in there, he cleaned it up really quickly. It was always very well done. They do clean the room a couple times a day, which was nice. And actually by the end of the cruise, the crew was calling me by name. When I would go up to get food or I'd go up to get coffee or something, they knew who I was. So a really amazing crew. I do have to deduct points though for those first couple of days because it was I think they're understaffed. This is not great. It wasn't what I was told Virgin was going to be, that they have great food, great service, and all that. But it took a couple days to adjust, but they got there. And that's why I'm giving service a 4.2 out of a 5 rating. So when we consider all those scores together, that gives us an overall score for the Valiant Lady of a 4.6 out of a 5 rating. And y'all, that's a new record, and it should be because I think that's probably one of my favorite cruises to date. I've been on 20 odd cruises now. I think something closer to 30 cruises now, actually. And this one on Valiant Lady was up there in probably the top 2, top 3 of my favorite cruises. Everything was just so different, and I think that's what I really liked, that it wasn't the same old cruise experience. It wasn't the same old food in the dining room. It wasn't the same old show after dinner. Everything was different. So if you're someone who's been on a lot of cruises before and you're like, I'm kind of getting bored, not bored with cruising. We all love cruising, but I'm kind of getting over the same old experience. Go try Virgin and see what their experience is like because it's completely different. It'll open your eyes and be like a completely new first-time cruise experience. And that's what I really enjoyed about Virgin Voyages. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it informative. If you did, please go down below, give me a thumbs up. Also, consider subscribing to my channel as I have lots of cruise content to come, and I'm always doing cruise reviews just like this on cruise ships all around the world. Folks, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next adventure.